Good morning, everybody. Today we'll talk about UI collection view compositional layout. UI collection view compositional layout was introduced last year at WWDC 2019, iOS 13. Prior to iOS 13, what we used to create our collection views or our layouts for our collection views was UI collection view flow layout, right? So with UI collection view flow layout, if you needed to do any sort of like extra complexity or customization with that layout, you needed to go ahead and subclass UI collection view layout to get customizations and such into your collection views. With compositional layout, Apple decided to readdress making collection views easier to use, easier to manage, more flexible, faster to use. So they introduced compositional layout to us. Today, our objective is basically to introduce ourselves to the boilerplate code we need to set up a compositional layout. It's not to see the best parts of compositional layout today as yet, but we will, as the weeks go by, we will get more exposed to more complexity and more layouts we could do using compositional layout. But our main objective today is to get started with working with compositional layout and seeing the different parts of the structure we need in order to set up our collection views using that layout. So our objective, as I said, is to start understanding the building blocks for creating a compositional layout. We'll be using UI collection view diffable data source to configure our collection view. I've mentioned it before when we introduced UI table view diffable data source that is also compatible with collection views. So today we'll see the first time using diffable data source with a collection view. Along the way, we'll build our first collection view layout, a basic grid. So what we'll be doing is building a basic grid view with multiple columns using compositional layout. As we keep going deeper into the course, we'll see how to add header views, which we've seen before with flow layout, but we'll see how to do that using compositional layout. We'll also see how to return different sections for our collection views as well. And we'll also see what's really cool in compositional layout is the ability with one line of code to have your collection views even more flexible in the way they page across the screen. So like as a user scrolls, it could snap into place center, it could snap into place at the edge of the screen based on what your orthogonal scrolling property is. So that's like one of the biggest advantages for compositional layout is that a new introduction to what's known as orthogonal scrolling with your collection views. But again, we'll see that as we go deeper into the course where we're introducing compositional layouts and orthogonal scrolling and such. There's a lot involved with compositional layout. Books could get written about this, but today it's very basic introduction building blocks of getting set up with a compositional layout. Along the way, we'll come across different vocabularies, especially today as we're setting up. Anytime you set up a compositional layout, those are the things you'll be seeing. You need to create a size for your item, same as with flow layout, the item needs a size. Then we'll have the actual item. The item is the smallest building block of a compositional layout. A group has items, a section has groups, and the layout itself is made up of everything. So as we see in that particular figure here, in that diagram, the smallest part of a compositional layout is the item. The item is the very small, that square box we see here, the gray box. And the blue part is the group, right? So this is the group. And the groups are inside of a section because you could have multiple sections in a collection view here. And the section itself, along with other sections, make up the entire layout. So those are the building blocks for any sort of layout you're constructing using compositional layout. In that second diagram here that I illustrated, here we have two sections. The first section is dialogued in red. The second is in green. And within that section, you have groups. So the group here is in blue. Within the group, you have items. Here we have 4 items laid out horizontally. And we have a second section here. So anybody want to tell me how many collection views we have here in that diagram?
2.
We have 2 collection views, correct?
Yes.
Everybody agrees with Tiffany?
I disagree. I think we have 1.
Okay, so somebody disagrees and anybody else disagree?
I think we have 1 as well, 2 sections.
Okay, so some folks are saying we have 2, some folks are saying we have 1. So here we have 1 collection view with 2 sections.
Okay.
Right? And the beauty of compositional layout, you could tell the layout what sort of section or how you want to lay out your section. Based on that section, I could say return me a grid of 4 items laid out in that way, or I could say return me 1 item that takes up the full group. So remember, in that particular diagram here, we said a group is the blue sections, very similar here, a group is the blue section. So I could tell my item for that particular section, take up the entire group's width and take up the entire group's height. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Right, so as we keep coding that out, we'll get more familiar with it. It's a lot of moving parts. Don't get overwhelmed. My objective today is to just get us very introductory level as to what the compositional layout flow looks like, but not go too aggressive into showing us all the parts of it, because there's a lot of things you could do with this. So this is the boilerplate. This is the building blocks of a compositional layout. Smallest part is an item. You tell the item its size. Then you go to the group. You tell the group its size. Then you go to the section, which has groups. And then at the end of the day, you return a layout. The layout is composed of everything here. Any questions before we continue on?
No.
Okay, awesome. So here we're talking about describing the size of an item. So the way you could describe the size of an item, you could use what's known as a fractional width. So here I could say, I want my item width to be 1/4 the size or 1/4 the width of the group. So here I could use fractional width, same as I could say fractional height. Like I want it to be some fraction of the height of the group. It's always relative to the container. So anytime you are laying out some sort of item, whether it be an item or group, it's always relative to the thing it's in. So if you lay out an item, it's relative to the group. If you lay out a section, it's relative, if you lay out a group, it's relative to the section. So here you could also use absolute. Absolute is, I need exactly 200 points, or I need the thing to be exactly 44 points tall. So absolute would say exactly 44 points, as opposed to fraction is an aspect ratio of what the container is. And there's also estimated. We've all come across estimated size for table view cells or collection view cells, where it will grow or shrink based on the content. Same thing with the estimated here. If, for example, you have a header view, you could say, I want it to be estimated at 44. So if the user dynamically changes the font size of the phone, then it will grow based on what the user changed. Okay, so that's estimated. To lay out a group, you could lay out a group horizontally. You could lay out a group vertically. You could have custom groups, right? You could get really complicated, or you could have really complicated views and compose them. That's why the name compositional is there. You could compose those groups, or you can compose groups within groups. You could actually have nested groups and really have your collection view really be like presentable to the user in a UI kind of a way, right? Kind of like a Pinterest. You can have a Pinterest where you have grids dynamically moving around. You could do that with compositional layout really simply, as opposed to like how collection view flow layout was before, where you had to subclass and do a lot of boilerplate like math and stuff there. But with compositional layout, Apple, the whole objective is to make it easier for us to work with collection views. So from today on, I would really suggest that we really try to get up to par with like using compositional layout, especially if you're working on an app where it's iOS 13 or over. If it's not iOS 13, if it's like iOS 12 and below, then you have to use flow layout. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Very good. Okay, so with that said, we've got some theory out of the way. We will jump into building our first compositional layout app using an Xcode project from scratch. So let's now navigate over. This is what our app is going to look like. Again, it's nothing fancy. It's just getting us started with using compositional layout. So let's get started. Let's go to Xcode. Let's go to Xcode and call this project Xcode project. It's a single view app. We'll just call it Compositional Layout. No, that's fine. Compositional Layout. No unit test here. And next. I'll save this on my desktop. Actually, I have something. I'll save it in my folder here. Okay. Here we have our Xcode project. I'll change my simulator. We have our Xcode project. Let's get started. So first, let's go to our storyboard. We're working with collection views. So you could set up your collection view, not flow layout, compositional layout, not in storyboard, right? You cannot do that in storyboard. In storyboard, you have flow layout by default, that's what you have. But you cannot do compositional layout in storyboard. We have to do it programmatically as far as like setting that up. But I could add a collection view to my storyboard scene here. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to our object library and get a collection view. And our collection view will just be constrained to all 4 edges at 0. So set our constraints to 0 top, 0 leading, 0 trailing, and 0 bottom. So 0 all around. That's all we have for now. Let's continue on. Actually, we should probably set up the cell. Let's create a cell. I was going to drop in a cell here, but some of us probably need a review on creating our cell programmatically. So let's create a cell, new file. It's PopoTouch class. And it's a subclass of, what's a subclass?
UI collection view cell.
UI collection view cell. Thank you. And we'll just call this label cell. It's just a simple label. Again, our collection views don't come with any sort of like cell with attributes or properties. So we have to go ahead and customize our cell from the get-go, as opposed to our table view, which has text labels and image views and all that stuff. So here we have a label cell. We'll click next, create, and let's go set up our view. So we'll start off by creating a lazy property. We'll call it text label. It's a UI label. We have our closure, which will set up our label. We have a UI, actually, let me make this bigger, sorry. Preferences, font size. You let me know if this is big enough. UI label, and return our label. We'll make sure our label is centered. That's all we're doing for our label now. Nothing else too much here. Next up, we will implement init reframe in case we are coming from programmatic view. So this is coming from programmatic UI setup. And we need to implement the required initializer as well. Build to make sure we have no errors here. I have an error here, see direct frame. Did I use the wrong initializer? Yes, I did. So make sure you're using the init reframe, not coder. All right. In our case, we'll be coming from storyboard. So which initializer will get called? Well, this initializer will be getting called. So coming from storyboard. And if we come from storyboard and this initializer gets called, well, it's going to crash here because this is a fiddle crash. So we need to implement our super init with coder. And now we'll just implement or write a helper method, a helper initializer method. We'll just make it private here and we'll call it common init. And common init will be called from both initializers. And that common init will set up whatever we need. In our case, we just want to set up the constraints for the text label. So we'll go ahead and do so now. I'll create a private function here, just call the thing text label constraints. And our label, we just want to center it. Nothing too fancy here. What's the steps of setting up my constraints programmatically here?
Add the subview.
What's that?
Add to the subview.
Yeah, so we have to add it to the subview. Very good. So add subview, text label. What else? Somebody else? What else do we need to do here?
You got to remove the translate in.
Yes. So no longer is auto size mask taking care of our constraints, but we're using auto layout programmatically. So we have to set auto size mask to false on the text label. Very good. So text label translates auto size and mask constraints to false. What does this say? This says we will handle layout using auto layout. So resizing mask. Okay. Step 3, well, we'll just set up the constraints here. So set up required constraints. And here we'll say NS layout constraints. We want to activate all constraints and we'll pass it in an array. So what do we want to do? We'll set center X, center Y. Let's go ahead and do so. So our text label dot center Y constraint is equal to the views center Y constraint, right? That's one constraint so far. Next constraint, we'll do the X, so center X constraint. Also center X here. And we'll also give some padding to the left and the right, or the leading and the trailing. We'll give some padding. So to give it padding, we'll say leading anchor constraint to leading of the view, and we'll give it some padding of 8. And same thing for the trailing. We'll say trailing anchor constraint to trailing anchor of the view. And here, is it 8? Is that good? Am I good here?
No, -8.
-8. Very good. Awesome. So that's what we have here. And don't forget to call our text label constraints in our common init. So what's going to be happening here is if you come from storyboard, it calls it super, then it calls common init calls our constraint, set up constraint here, and we are good to go. If we're coming from programmatic, not storyboard, then our common init is still going to get called and set up our constraints. Any questions about that particular review exercise here? That's just setting up programmatic UI. Anybody still typing? We good?
All good.
All good. All right, let's go to our storyboard again. That's what brought us here because we needed a label or we needed a cell. Let's go back to our storyboard. So our constraint is set for our collection view. Let's click on our cell. That'll bring up our inspector. For the reuse identifier, does the reuse identifier come up, everybody? Where it says collection view, reusable view, is your inspector window open when you click on the cell?
Yes.
Okay. So where it says identifier, let's just put in label cell here. Make sure to press enter. So for identifier, we put label cell and click on the identity inspector. So click on the identity inspector next. What are we changing here?
Label
What do we
cell.
need to? Yeah, we need to change the cell. Thank you so much. Because now this is a custom class. We need to use our custom cell we just created. So type in label cell and press enter. And at that point, we are ready to go. Our collection view knows about its cell. It has a reuse identifier. So now we could open up the inspector. So option click on your view controller. Option click on your view controller. That will open up the inspector. And now let us control drag from our scene over to our view controller. So here, I'll control drag from my collection view over to my view controller and just simply call it collection view. And to verify again, what is the default layout of my collection view? If I'm using storyboard here?
Flow.
Flow, right? So if we go here, the default layout is collection view flow layout. If I toggle, there's only custom here. There's no compositional layout. So our compositional layout, we have to do it in code. Right. Very good. Thank you. So now let us.
Can I see your label cell dot Swift really quick?
Yep. Label cell here.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
So go back to our view controller here. Let's refactor that view controller while we're here. So refactor, rename, and we'll call this grid view controller because our objective is just create a grid. And we have our collection view all ready to go. Great. So the first thing we want to do in our view controller is go ahead and configure the collection view. Configure collection view. Well, I want to configure the collection view, but I don't have a layout yet, so that's not going to work. So this is almost like step 2 of this whole process. Step 1 is going to be to actually create a layout. This is the whole objective of the class here today. So our first sort of logic code we'll be writing in the view controller is from the lesson where we said, if I have to go back to the lesson, we'll come back to the code. If I go back to the lesson here in our diagram, we need to set up an item. We need to set up a group. We need to set up a section and return a layout. Same thing here. This is what we're going for, not 2 sections. We could easily have 2 sections. We'll see that as we keep going through those lessons. But for today, we'll simply create 1 section with 4 items, a group, and return that layout. So the first item we need, the first component we need to create is an item. After that item, we'll create a group. After that group, we'll create a section. And after that, we'll return the layout. Okay. So this is 1. Let's go through those steps. So step 1, create and configure the item. Okay, so to configure the item, we need an item size. So let's create an item size. And for the item size, we want it to take roughly a quarter of the group. So a quarter of the group's width and the full height of the group. Here we're seeing some insets. We'll come to the insets later. But for now, just assume we'll be taking up the entire height of the group. So let's go ahead and set that up. So an item size We need to set that up. That's called to set an item size. Anything we're doing with the collection view layout, we'll be seeing a lot of NS stuff, like prefix NS. Again, NS stands for next step, right? That's next step. That's Objective-C days. That's Steve Jobs days when they first started, like Objective-C and all that stuff there. So NS collection layout item, actually layout size. This is the first thing we're going to be going for. So any of those 4 components or 4 things we'll be setting up, we'll be using NS collection layout something. Okay. So for the size, we'll be using NS layout, NS collection layout. Sorry. NS collection layout size. And the size initializer takes a width and it takes a height. Now, the dimension is of NS collection layout dimension. That's the type. So the dimension, the type, the data type of it is a collection layout dimension, okay? So go ahead and select the width initializer here, the width dimension initializer. And as we said earlier, with the item size, there's 4 types or 3 types of sizes you could use. And if we look at the lesson and we go down to describing the size, we have a fractional width or height, we have absolute, and we have estimated. In this particular example, we'll just be dealing with fractional. So let's go ahead and say we want the width. So for the dimension, just use dot. It's an enum type here. Use fractional width. And for the fractional width, you pass in a CG float. So fractional width, we said we wanted to take a quarter the size. So to show what a quarter size is 0.25. This is 25%. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Now for the height, we said we wanted to take up the entire group's height. So again, we'll use fractional height this time. And if I wanted to take up the entire height, what am I using here?
1.0.
1.0. Very good. So here, this is what we've done. We said item takes up 25% of the group's width. Item takes up 100% of the group's. Okay, so this
Alex?
is what we, yes.
How does it know what the size of the group is at the moment?
We need to also, after we first do the item, then we do the group. The group is gonna come from the section.
All right, cool.
All right, very good. So Kelby's question, how does the item know the group size? The group knows from the section, and then that's how each knows its size. It's coming from the container. So the item refers to the container, and in that case, the item's container is the group. The group is referring to the section. So the section is gonna be the container for the group. So that's how everybody knows this size. Very good. And as I said before, we could use absolute numbers here. So for example, if I wanted to put a hard-coded number in here, I could have said absolute, make the width like 20 points or something like that, right? So just keep that in mind here. All right, so we have the item size. Let's keep going. So we have the item size. Now we could actually create an item.
Alex,
Yes.
do you know why my computer might not be picking up NS collection view?
That's coming from UIKit Foundation stuff. Try to build, make sure you have no more errors.
No, it was a typo, my bad.
Okay, yeah, that happens. Okay, so we have our item here. And again, if you want to get an item, we'll go NS collection layout item. And the item just simply looks for a size here. We're not gonna get into supplementary items for now, but we're using the initializer that takes in a size. And we have a size. There, great. So our item is good. Let's go to our group. So here, create and configure. Same thing, the group needs a size. So we'll say group size, and the size, same as before, collection size. And for the width, we'll also use fractional here, fractional. So fractional width, we want the group to take up, based on our diagram here, we want the group, picture the blue here, also picture the blue here. We want the group to take up the entire section. So what size are we passing?
1.0.
1.0, very good. So this takes up the entire section. So the group takes up the entire section. All right. Next, we're also using fractional. In that case, we're actually going to be using fractional width just because we want our grid to come out somewhat square. So here, I will say I want the group's height to basically be a quarter of the width. Everybody with me? We have the section has a width. Everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The section takes up the entire device screen, right? If I want the group to take a quarter of the section, that makes it a square. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So to do that, I'm gonna say fractional, I'm right here. I'm gonna say fractional width, take up 0.5%, 0.25%, which is 25%. And to write that in English here, so we all understand this. So the group takes up 100% of the section's width, right? And the group's height is 25% of the sections. Everybody sees this?
Yes.
Right, so that's why we refer to width twice here, as opposed to height, right? So you could be very dynamic with how you want to layer things out. So we have a group size. Let's go add our group now.
Wait,
And
Alex,
yes,
I have a question. In the image that we have for figure 2 on the, yeah, that one right there, that seems to be like a third of the section, no?
it's gonna come in, at the end of the day, the first time we build our app, it will take up edge to edge.
Okay.
And then we'll come back, we'll add content insets to the item.
So we're setting the section to be full screen? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
And so
right now, our collection view takes up the full screen already.
Okay. So we're not mimicking this right here.
We will be, not the bottom part, just like focus on the orange part here.
Okay.
But we will add content insets to the item. I don't want to add it now to give us more things to think about. I'll add it after we build our first project.
Okay.
The items themselves. When you said a third, you're talking about the height or the width?
Yeah, the height of that, of each group here seems to be a third and not 25%. Like it seems to be like 30% or maybe like 33% of the section, not 25%. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, focus on the width of the section and divide it by 4. Yes, it doesn't look like it is now just because there's insets on this particular diagram.
Okay.
It's gonna be apparent in code when we get there.
Okay.
But definitely come back if it's still not clear, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So here we have our group and collection layout group. And the group will come again to supplementary items, but not today. All what we need is the layout size initializer and pass in a group size. So we're done with the group.
Wait. Sorry. I just wanted to, because I saw that I had 2 fractional widths, but I see that I'm not bugging out. I'm supposed to have 2 fractional widths.
Yes, that's what I was just showing here with the illustration. So if you look at the width here, like just draw our horizontal line, look at the width, the blue width.
Yes.
And then we divided it by 4.
Okay.
So we're trying to get like a square grid.
No, that's fine. And then for the group.
And then the group will just pass the size because the group initializer is just asking, hey, give me the size for this group that you want to create.
Oh, it's in this layout group.
Yes. So we're going to come across layout group, layout size, layout section.
Got you.
Very good. Actually, now we're about to see the layout section here. So here we are configuring section, or the section. And here the section doesn't need a size. We just pass in NS collection layout section. And here we pass in our group. Okay, I think I missed one thing here. Let's see. Group size, group, oh, right here. Section group, and I'll return my layout. 1 second. I think I missed something here. Yes, I did. So let's refactor our code here for a second. You see where on line 40, it says layout group and we pass in the size. We need to also say what type of layout we're using. Is it horizontal or vertical? Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just refactor this a little bit. So NS layout group dot, and we have horizontal, we also have vertical. So here we want to lay out our items horizontally across from left to right. So go ahead and use horizontal. And we have 2 initializers. Again, the thing is very flexible. There's a lot of things you could do here. We have 2 initializers. Be careful to use, not be careful, but we'll come to the next one. Use the initializer that just takes in 2 arguments. Not the one with the 3 arguments. We'll come back and see what the second initializer looks like. But use the initializer that takes a layout size and sub items. So we still pass in the group size, and for the sub items, it expects an array of items. So just pass in an array of items like this. Okay, this is our item. What items is it laying out? Again, this could be very dynamic, as into having more items you want to lay out dynamically based on the layout you want. So we have our group, and then we are good. Sorry about that. And lastly, let us configure the layout. Configure layout equal to UI collection view compositional layout. And here we have more initializers. We have a section initializer that just takes in a section. We have one that takes in a section and a configuration. We have one that takes in a section provider, which will come across, because now you could get multiple sections based on your enum type. That's why enums are great. We'll create an enum soon. But based on your enum case, you could return whatever section you want and compose it whichever way you want, right? So here, we'll just keep this simple. We'll just use a section here, the initializer that takes in a section, and we pass in a section. And lastly, we want to return the layout. So update your function definition to return a UI collection view layout. Okay? And build, make sure you have no errors at this point. And let's just review what we've done. It may seem a lot. It may be like, wow, why are we doing all that stuff? But at the end of the day, this code you have here is very reusable. It's just like the steps you have to follow. Set up your items, set up your group, set up your section, return the layout. Okay? So first we set up the item size because the item needs a size. Then we set up the group. The group needs a size, so we set that up first, and we pass it the size. We use one of 2 initializers. We set it up horizontally. You could also do vertical groups. So you could do vertical groups along with, you could do vertical groups along with horizontal groups in the same section. So you could be very, very dynamic and complex at the same time using compositional layout. The way the whole composing views or composing things is at our disposal. That's why, again, compositional layout, you could compose groups within groups, sections. The thing is very powerful. So here we have our layout. We set up our group. We have our section, which takes a group. And then we have our layout. Here we just pass in the section. But as I said, your layout could have multiple sections and multiple ways to lay out each section. We'll come into that tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow we should be able to take a look at one of those examples. So moving on, we have our create layout. Make sure to return your collection view layout. Is everybody able to build at this point?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So now we could actually go to configuring the collection view. So our collection view right now, what's the layout on it? Our collection view here, what's the layout?
Oh.
Flow. Right? So the default is flow layout here. We want to change that to compositional layout. So we'll do it in the configure collection view here. Again, this is coming from storyboard. If it wasn't coming from storyboard, you could have easily done, this code is not gonna work, but you could easily done this collection view equal to UI collection view, and then you give it a frame. Let's just say the bound, the whole view, and then you call create layout. This here would work programmatically, right? So keep this here for your own reference. So if been done programmatically, this is how you would set up your collection view. You give it a frame, and you give it a layout. And that layout comes from this particular layout here. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
All right. Very good. Let us continue on. Where am I here? Don't miss anything along the way. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and change. Now we need to change. So we have collection view, flow layout, and here, this property, the layout used to organize the collected view items, you could give it a different layout here. So we'll just call create layout. So now it's no longer a flow layout. So from flow layout to compositional. Again, you do this if you're using, do this if using storyboard to lay out your sense storyboard. Okay, awesome. So for now, we could give this a background color. Just to test this, make sure we are getting some color. Make sure this is working. We'll come back and change the color later. And let's call our configure collection view. So for now, we're just testing, make sure that we do have a collection view showing up that is yellow, okay? So let's go ahead and run our app for the first time and see what we have. Okay, at this point, we should have a yellow screen if all went well. And we did give it a background color of any color of our choice. We should see some sort of color here. Great, so that means all is well. I will change this to something else. Just background. Again, really try to use system colors as opposed to saying, hey, make it yellow, right? Because it supports dark mode right out of the box if you use a system color. All right, so now we configured this. We are good to go. Next up, step 1, step 2. I want to make sure I'm writing those correctly for you. Okay, next step, we want to go ahead and set up an enum to hold our sections. So here, we'll say set up enum to hold. Again, you could have one section, you could have many sections. We'll have our enum type here. We'll call it section. You could call it anything you want. That's fine. And we'll just have one section. We'll call it main, like that. And why we're doing that? Because we're about to use UI collection view differable data source. This is the first time we'll be using it with a collection view. So step 3, This could have been step 1, right? Not really, it's okay. Step 4. Nope. Step 4. Clear our data source. Using okay, so here we'll make it private. Call it data source. It's UI collection view diffable data source. Same way we have UI table view, right? There's also UI table view. Here we're using UI collection view. Okay. And we saw the benefits and the flexibility of using diffable data sources. So here it's a generic type. It takes 2 arguments. The first one is the section. The second one is the item. So in our section, it's called section. And the second, both of them need to be hashable, right? So review both the section identifier and item identifier needs to okay, cool. So section is hashable, enum is hashable by default, and we'll just use an int, okay? Our data is just an int for now, but we could have our own custom type data, but for now it's just an integer. Okay, cool. So we have declared our data source. Next, any questions about diffable data source before we continue? Stop me at any point of this. There's new things, there's old things, there's review things. Stop me at any point. Okay.
I think I need to see a little more before I ask questions.
Okay, cool. So 4, let's go to 5. So 5, we'll put it at the bottom here, and 5 is basically configure the data source. Right, so our collection view needs a data source, right? We have our collection view, right? And it needs data somewhere, so that's where the data source comes in. Configure our data source, so here we'll say private func configure data source. Right. Doesn't take in any arguments, and let's go ahead and configure it. So data source is UI, again, you could do an alias for that. Remember aliases? Yes?
Yeah.
All right. UI collection view diffable data source. We put in a section, we put in int, and here we pass in. Very similar, this is very similar to table views here with what we've done. So I'll have my UI collection view diffable data source, 2 arguments, section, and item. Next, I take my initializer, If you put in an open parens, you're not gonna get like autocomplete. So start typing in collection view, everybody. And then you'll see collection view initializer. Do we see that?
Yeah.
So open parens, start typing in collection view. Then you'll see your options. Then choose the one that says collection view with cell provider and press enter. And then type in collection view again. And the cell provider tab, press enter. The cell provider has 3 arguments. The first one is the collection view. The second is the index path. And the third is the actual item. In our case, actually, let me just call it item. In our case, the item is actually an int, right? Can I option click on this? No. So the item here is an int. Why? Because this is what I'm saying here. I'm telling the compiler, I'm telling Swift, hey, I have an item and it's an integer. So this item is an integer. The compiler infers it's an int. So this again is very similar to our cell for row. Here is where I would configure the cell and return the cell. So let me put 1. And here we are. Actually, I don't think we've done a custom cell diffable data sources, correct? Have we done a custom cell?
No.
Okay, so today we'll see an example of that because we have to. Same as cell for row, I'll guard it, make sure it is the thing I'm expecting. I'll say cell, I will say collection view, I will dequeue, same thing as cell for row. Dequeue, don't dequeue a supplementary view, right? We'll come to that tomorrow or the lesson after that, but we want to dequeue a cell. So you want to use the option dequeue reusable cell. Supplementary view is, for example, if you want to have a header for your collection view, or you want to have a footer view for your collection view, right? So here we'll use dequeue reusable cell, and then our identifier needs to match what we have in storyboard. So here I have label cell and index path. And now I need to typecast it to the thing I'm expecting. I'm expecting to dequeue a label cell. If I do not dequeue a label cell, I will crash the app because this is a developer error, right? So here I will say could not dequeue a label cell. Again, if we get here, this is not production code. This is a developer error. So I need to fix this before I continue working. So now I have my cell. I could simply return cell. At this point, build, make sure you have no errors. So what have we done here? We've configured our data source, because at this point, before we did line 73, our data source was nil. We configured it, we gave it the cell, we returned the cell, and now we are good to go as far as the data source is concerned. But now if we want to populate the table view with actual data, that's where the snapshot comes in. So next step is, so this one is just setting up the data source, right? Setting up the data source. And this step here is actually setting up the initial snapshot. Okay. So for the snapshot, same as table views, we query the snapshot, or we create a snapshot using NS diffable snapshot. The good thing is both of them is the same. NS diffable snapshot for table views and for collection views, it's the same. But here we have to pass it the same generic types. So section and int. And now an initializer that doesn't take in any arguments. Next, before we do anything else, let's just set up or apply the snapshot to the data source and pass in some animating differences or false. Okay. Our snapshot, it needs sections and it needs us to append some items to the sections. In our case, we only have one section. So let's first go ahead and append the sections. If we had multiple sections, we would append multiple sections, but we only have one section. So here we have only one section. As we keep doing this, we'll see more sections. So we'll add more sections here. Next, I want to create, again, your data could be coming from a web API, it could be coming from local data, the user data, whatever. But here, we're just creating some static data using some array of numbers, or yeah, of an array of ints. So here, we'll just say snapshot.append items, okay? And it's expecting, let me go back and show us here. So items, it's expecting an array of ints. So we'll just pass it an array of ints. Again, this is for illustration purposes. So we'll just create an array of numbers from 1 to 100. Okay, so that's it here, basically. So to review, we set up our data source. It's expecting the section is of type section. That's from our enum type. It only has one case right now, so one section. The items we're passing in, or the items our collection view is expecting, is ints. Next thing we have here is our cell provider, which is very similar to our cell for row. It has 3 arguments here. We have a collection view, the pointer to the collection view. We have an index path if we want to query, hey, is it index path that section equal to 0, or whatever we want to do with the index path here. Next, we have the actual object. So we don't have to say index path some array dot summary index path dot row. We don't have to do that because we have the item right away here for us. So we could use that item directly, which I haven't used here. So let's go ahead and use that. You see, one part of walking over your code is coming up with those situations where I'm missing my cell, configuring the actual cell. So let's put in cell.text label text equal to whatever the item is. Okay, so cell is our custom cell, our label cell. Text label is the one property on it, and the label has a text property, and then we just interpolate, string interpolate here, and just pass in the item. So example 1 to 3, it will just show that in the cell. Cool. And next we set up our snapshot. We added the one and only section to it. We added items to that section, items from 1 to 100. And here we applied, don't forget to apply the snapshot to the data source. A beauty of having the section, not the section, the items hashable, you cannot attempt, if you try to attempt to enter one twice, it will give you a compiler error, or a warning rather. Not a compiler error, but a warning which could eventually crash your app. So it ensures that you're not adding duplicate values to your collection view or your table view, right? So it makes it hashable by default, so the compiler infers right away, hey, you added a 1 before, you cannot add a 1 again. We actually first run it, and then we'll come back and see what that looks like. So we have our configure data source. Let's go ahead and call it right after our configure collection view. Call configure data source here. And we should be able to test this. One more thing, give your cell a color. So cell background color system. You can give it any color you want. I'm just gonna go with orange. I love orange for some reason. So orange is good, and make sure your viewDid load has a call to the collection view and a call to the data source. Any questions before we run the app?
Alex, you haven't registered the cell yet.
I haven't registered the cell yet. We did not do that in the storyboard?
I mean, with the collection view.
We should be good here. We have our cell here. It's registered here. Right. Let's see what we have. What error are you getting?
Never mind, it's all good on my end.
Okay, because remember,
For some reason.
what's that? Make sure that you in your storyboard, that's where we register the cell, right? We didn't do it programmatically. Because I think what May is saying is, if you're doing it programmatically, like over here somewhere, you'd say like collection view dot register cell.
Yeah, it's saying that it can't be to label cell.
Make sure the names are the same. Like double check your, let me go back to storyboard. So in storyboard, click on your cell. 2 things you need to make sure is there. 1, the class is label cell, and 2, identifier is label cell. May, you good?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know why it didn't.
For some reason, my class was the letter Z.
Z. So you had a lazy cell. Monday, I'm having fun. What can I say?
Down reaction.
What's that, Christian?
The thumbs down reaction, not just a thumbs up.
A thumbs up. Okay, very good. All right, so I ran it and it did work. Let's see if we see all our cells. We do see all our cells. So was that a mini earlier? Asking about our cell doesn't look as it on the illustration, right? So here, a mini?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so now we don't have any content insets because this guy doesn't have any content insets. The cells are next to each other, right? Correct?
Yeah.
Okay, does everybody have work before I continue actually?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So now our cell is being rendered. We could go ahead and add our content insets now. just to have some space between the cells. If we want, you could keep it that way, that's okay. But for now, we could actually just add content inserts to our item. So right in our create layout function, right after let item, we could say item.content inserts. Content inserts will provide some sort of padding between the cells, between the cell and its borders. So the content inserts here takes an argument of type NS directional edge insets, right? Not rect edge, but NS direction edge insets, open parens, and you want to go down to not for decoder, from decoder, but rather you want to go with the 4 arguments, the one that has 4 arguments, a top pattern, a leading pattern, bottom, and trailing. So here you could give it values, CG point values. Here I give it 5, 5 at the top, 5 at the leading, 5 at the bottom, and 5 at the trailing. So that creates some sort of pattern for the item. So if I run the app again, here we're gonna get some pattern. Did everybody get pattern on theirs?
I'm still running.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. So this is an item. You could also put pattern. If I take a look at the group here. So if you see that blue group, actually, let me take a look at this group here. The top, the first image. If you take a look at that group here, I could actually also add some sort of pattern for the group if I want. Instead of making it edge to edge or almost edge to edge, I could give it some more padding as well. So on the group, you could also add some sort of content insets as well. Same type, NS directional edge insets. At the top, I'll say 0. At the leading, I'll say 5. At the bottom, I'll say 0. At the trailing, I'll say 5. I'll run my app again. And there, that looks more symmetrical, right? So again, the objective is just to get us familiar with the building blocks of compositional layout. There's much more we will be able to do with this, okay? So tomorrow we'll take a look at adding more sections and adding different layouts for the sections. Any questions about what we did today? And does everybody have their collection view being rendered? Actually, let me show us one more thing. So let's focus on let's focus on line 59. Line 59, we said, set up our group horizontally using a layout size and sub-items. Comment that line out. So comment out line 59. You'll get errors, so yes. And then create a new one that takes in a different initializer. So NS collection group again, dot horizontal. This time we'll use the second initializer, the one that has a count argument. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead and use this one. The first argument is looking for the size. The second argument is looking for the item. The third argument is the count. How many columns you want, basically. Here, I could say I want 2 columns. Let's see what that looks like. I got 2 columns, right? So it laid out. It configured my collection view with 2 columns because I said I want 2 columns. I could say I want 10 columns. Right? I might not see anything here after I get to number 10 or when I get to number 10, but it lays it out in a grid of 10 columns here. Was everybody able to do this and get the results that I have on screen?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So already we're seeing the power of compositional layout, right? The way you could just say, hey, this is what I want.
Move the simulator out of the way.
Move the simulator out of the way.
All right, sorry. It was what I thought.
You got it? Okay, cool. Very good. I could say I want 1. Right? And there we are. Okay. I'll go back to 4. Right? So this one basically overrides anything else that you have. It tries to lay out in 4 columns as we have here. And earlier before, we actually specified this, like take 25% of the width. But if you say I want 1, it overrides what the item size was. Everybody with me?
Yep.
Okay, very good. So this is very good introduction, very boilerplate as far as like the building blocks we need for whichever sort of layout we want. Nothing complex here, just a basic grid. We'll come back tomorrow, we'll use the same app and we'll keep building upon it using some sort of like tab controller so we could go through different code logic and see if we've built in our own app, like how we could compose our layouts using what we've learned today or see across the web. I'll highly recommend, since you got exposed to compositional layout today, I would highly recommend taking a look at this video here, WWC 2019, when they first introduced compositional view layout. I would highly recommend taking a look at that video, making sure that it is the right link. Was everybody able to get to the link? It might just be my Wi-Fi. Okay, there we go. So yeah, this is the video, the link works. So make sure you guys take a look at that video here. Just like run through it, it's 15 minutes long, but just like there's bits and pieces you'll pick up along the way that we spoke about today and stuff like that. And other things we'll come across and see as we keep building out compositional layout. So that would be highly recommended viewing. And also the docs is always good to go to see what is there, right? We have our section, we have our group. In our group, we have item. So they show you a basic layout here, very similar to something that we did. This one, the width is the entire width of the group. The height is the entire height of the group. You have your item size, and here they're doing absolute. So absolute is hard-coded number of 44 points. The fractional width is the fractional width of the section. So this would render your items. So those are the things to start looking at. It's a really cool API.